Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. You are listening to The Deep Dive. I'm your host.
And I'm your expert for today's conversation.
Today, we were doing something a little bit different. We are stepping into a space that is, well, it's usually quiet, it's usually somber, and frankly, it's usually pretty resistant to change.
That's putting it mildly.
We're talking about the collision of two very, very different worlds. On one side, you have the hyper-connected, digital, fast-paced world we all live in now, the world of notifications and cloud storage and, instant access to everything.
Right. And on the other side, you have the slow, reverent, deeply traditional world of funeral services, a world that, for the most part, has looked the same for 100 years.
Exactly. And it's a fascinating intersection.
It really is. We talk a lot on this show about disruption in finance, disruption in media, but we rarely talk about disruption in grief.
That's a great point. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because we're fiercely protective of it. We have this deep-seated instinct that technology is cold, metallic, and distant. Impersonal. Totally impersonal. While mourning is warm and messy and deeply human. So when you try to mix them, the immediate reaction for a lot of people is, get your screens away from this sacred moment.
Exactly. There is a genuine fear of, cheapening the experience.
Yeah.
But the stack of research we're covering today, including some really practical insights from the funeral program site and some broader sociological studies on modern mourning, it all suggests that we might be looking at this the wrong way. The topic today is bridging tradition, digital guest books in modern funeral services. But before you roll your eyes and think, great, now I have to download an app to go to a funeral, just hold on.
Please hold on, because the argument here isn't about replacing tradition. It's not about throwing out the old ways.
Not at all. It's about saving it from irrelevance.
That is the mission today. We need to look at the guest book, that leather-bound staple you always see in the lobby, and we need to ask if it's actually doing its job anymore.
Is it fit for purpose in the 21st century?
Exactly, because the data suggests that for the way we live now, the physical book is, well, it's broken. It's failing families. And the digital alternative isn't just a tech upgrade or some kind of gimmick. It's a fundamental shift in how we process memory and, maybe more importantly, how we support each other through loss.
So let's start with that. The status quo, the paper guest book. I think I've signed one at every single funeral I've ever attended. It's just there. It's always on a podium. Maybe there's a nice pen that's chained to the desk so you don't steal it. Or
sometimes it's one of those feathery pens that just does not write very well at all.
Oh, the worst. But it feels necessary. Like if it wasn't there, something would be fundamentally wrong.
It's a ritual object, and rituals are powerful. We can't deny that. Historically, the guest book comes from a time when physical presence was the only kind of presence. If you go back to, say, Victorian mourning customs, or even further back, the record of attendance was a legal and social document.
Really?
In some contexts, yes. It was the roll call. It proved you paid your respects to the family, that you were part of the community that was upholding its social obligation.
Right. It's the I was here document. It's the proof of life, in a way, at an event centered on death.
And for the family, in the immediate aftermath of a death, that is so valuable. We talk about the fog of grief in the psychological literature. I mean, think about it. You stand in a receiving line for 3 hours, you shake 500 hands, you hug strangers, and you go home and you remember absolutely nothing.
It's a total blur. You have no idea who was there.
None. You don't know who said what, who squeezed your hand. So opening that book a week later, seeing the signatures, it anchors you. It says, okay, the community showed up. I am supported. I am not alone.
It's a reality check, a tangible piece of evidence that people cared. But, and this is where the sources we looked at really start to pick apart the tradition, is a simple list of signatures actually the best way to capture that support? Because when you really look at the user experience of a paper guest book, it's kind of a nightmare.
It is a design failure in almost every single regard when you compare it to modern needs. Let's just break down the mechanics for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
You're usually standing in a line. It's often in a vestibule or some crowded entryway. There are people behind you, maybe shifting their weight, checking their watches. You feel this immense pressure to be quick.
You feel rushed. You're holding up the line.
You're holding up the line. So you step up to the podium, and what are you faced with? A tiny horizontal line, maybe 3 inches long.
And you're wearing a heavy coat, maybe you're holding an umbrella, you're fumbling with a tissue because you've been crying. It's not exactly an ergonomic setup for writing a heartfelt memoir.
Precisely. So what do you write? What can you possibly write in that space, under that pressure?
So name.
You write your name. Maybe if you have really small, neat handwriting, you can squeeze in, "Sorry for your loss."
The classic.
That's it. You are asked to represent your entire relationship with the deceased, maybe 30 years of friendship, college road trips, business partnerships, deep conversations, with a signature and a cliche.
Wow. When you put it like that.
It reduces complex human connections to administrative data.
That's a brutal way to put it. Reducing a relationship to administrative data. But you're right. I've never once written a heartfelt story in a guest book because there's literally no room, and I always feel like there's a guy breathing down my neck waiting for his turn.
And then, on top of all that, there's the issue of legibility. We've all seen families trying to decipher these books later on. Is that Bill? Is that Bob? Is that a doctor's prescription?
Is that a J or an L? Who is this person?
If you can't read it, the record is useless. But the biggest flaw, and this is the one the sources really, really harp on, is what they call the presence barrier.
The presence barrier. Okay, this feels like the absolute crux of the modern problem. Let's unpack that.
So the paper book operates on a very strict binary. You are either physically in that room at that time, or you are not.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. If you are in the room, you get to sign your name and be part of the official history of that day. If you are not in the room, for any reason whatsoever, you are invisible. You effectively do not exist in the context of that memorial.
At 50, 60 years ago, that might have been fine. Most people, they lived and died within a 20-mile radius of where they were born. If you cared, you just drove over.
Exactly. The community was local. The support network was defined by geography. But look at us now. The geography of grief, as some sociologists call it, has changed completely.
How so?
Families are diasporic. Your kids might be in Tokyo for work. Your college roommate, who is like a brother to you, is in Seattle, and your parents retired to Florida. We move for jobs, for love, for adventure. We are spread out all over the globe.
So if I'm that college roommate and I can't get a flight from Seattle on 3 days' notice because funerals are rarely planned weeks in advance,
Almost never.
or I can't get time off work, which is a huge barrier the sources mentioned,
Boy,
I'm distinct. I'm erased from the story of that day.
you're erased from the record. You might send flowers, sure, but flowers wilt in a week.
They're gone.
You might send a card, but cards get lost in a shoebox, or, let's be honest, sometimes thrown out during the cleanup months later. The guest book is the official archive. It's the thing that's kept. And by relying solely on paper, we are systematically excluding the people who often care the most, but just can't physically bridge the distance.
And that's where the digital guest book comes in. But I want to be really careful with definitions here because digital guest book sounds like it could be a lot of different things. Are we talking about like a Facebook wall? Are we talking about a specific device at the funeral home?
That's a great question because it's a broad umbrella term in the industry, but the source material from the funeral program site really helps narrow it down for us. We are not talking about a social media post.
Look.
A social media post feels fleeting, it's public in a really messy way. A Facebook wall is where you see an ad for sneakers right next to a heartfelt condolence message. That's not what we want.
No, that dissonance is jarring.
It's totally jarring. We're talking about a dedicated, structured, electronic platform. This can be a specific memorial website, a permanent page hosted by the funeral home, or even an interface accessed via a tablet or a QR code at the service itself.
So it's a container, a dedicated digital container specifically for memories related to this person.
Correct. And the key distinction, the thing that separates a digital guest book from just posting on Facebook, is intention and permanence. This is designed to be an archive. It's designed to be visited years from now. It's not about likes or shares or algorithms.
It's about collection.
It's about collection and preservation.
Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room, the tech fest fear. I think a lot of people, especially from older generations, they hear digital and they immediately imagine people staring at their phones during the eulogy.
The blue glow of a screen during a prayer.
Yeah. They imagine the solemnity being just completely broken by technology.
And that is the #1 barrier to adoption. It's a valid fear. The fear that technology is inherently disrespectful or distracting in a sacred space. But the expert analysis here is really, really interesting.
What do they argue?
They argue that if you design the experience correctly, the technology actually increases the human connection. It doesn't replace the hug. It doesn't replace the handshake.
It's not an either situation.
Never. The source material is emphatic about this. It emphasizes what it calls a hybrid philosophy. You do not throw out the paper book. That would be a huge mistake.
Why's that?
Because you'd be alienating a whole group of people. You keep the paper book for the ritual, for the older generation, for that tangible feeling of signing something, but you open up a second lane, a parallel path.
I like the highway analogy that was used in the notes. The paper book is the local road. It gets you there. It's familiar, but it has a speed limit and a pretty low capacity.
Right.
The digital book is the express lane you build right next to it.
That's a perfect analogy. It creates a safety net. If you are physically there, you can sign the paper. If you're there, but you have a lot more you want to say, you can use the digital version later.
Yeah.
If you aren't there at all, you use the digital version. No one falls through the cracks.
It handles the overflow of emotion.
Exactly, the overflow of emotion and story that a 3-inch paper line simply cannot contain.
I love that concept. No one falls through the cracks. Because that leads us perfectly into the next section we need to cover. The sources outline what they call the 3 pillars of adoption. Basically, why are families actually choosing to do this? Why go through the extra step?
What's the real world value?
Right. And the first pillar is exactly what you just hinted at. Inclusivity. Or, as I like to call it, the geography problem.
The geography problem is the defining challenge of modern families, and by extension, modern grief. We touched on this, but let's really look at the specific barriers to attendance. The source lists travel constraints, obviously. The cost of a last-minute flight can be thousands of dollars. But it's also about health concerns. Think about elderly relatives, maybe the deceased's own siblings, who might be in a care facility or are just physically too frail to travel.
Right. They want to be there more than anyone in the world, but their body just won't let them. It's a source of profound sadness for them.
Exactly. Or think about work obligations. Not everyone gets bereavement leave for a friend or an aunt or an uncle. The economy doesn't pause for grief.
That's a big one. I think a lot of people carry this guilt of, I just can't get Tuesday off, so I missed the funeral. And that guilt can sit with you for years.
And that guilt is real, and it's corrosive. The source highlights the huge emotional benefit of the digital book here. It solves that guilt. It allows those people to contribute in a meaningful way. They aren't just absent anymore. They become active participants in the memory making.
It changes the narrative in their head.
It completely reframes it. It goes from I missed it to I was part of it just from a distance.
But it's deeper than just geography, though, isn't it? The research also talks about what sociologists call disenfranchised grief.
Yes, this is such a crucial concept and a perfect application for digital guest books. Disenfranchised grief is any grief that isn't socially recognized or publicly validated.
Give me an example.
Okay, think about an ex-spouse. They might have shared 20 years of their life with the person. They might still care deeply, but showing up at the funeral might cause family drama.
Right. It could be seen as inappropriate.
Or a friend from an online gaming community who knew the deceased intimately for years but never met the family in person. Or a coworker from a remote job who lives 3 states away.
I didn't know the wife, so I can't just walk in. That threshold of the funeral home feels like a real barrier for some people.
It's a huge barrier. The physical threshold of the funeral home is intimidating if you aren't inner circle, but a digital guest book, that's a much lower barrier to entry. It gives those people a safe space to say, I knew him, he mattered to me. It validates their grief without forcing them to intrude on a physical space where they might feel unwelcome or uncomfortable.
So it democratizes the mourning process. It essentially says, if you cared, you count. Your grief is valid no matter what your official relationship was.
Beautifully put. If you cared, you count. And that leads directly to the second pillar of adoption, richer expression. We've talked about how the paper book limits you to a signature. The digital book, by its nature, invites narrative.
This is the difference between data and story, right?
Exactly. The sources show that when people are given a digital text box with no character limit, and this is key, they are doing it from the comfort and privacy of their own couch, not standing in a rain-soaked line.
The whole dynamic changes.
The nature of what they write completely changes. They don't write condolences. They write, let me tell you about the time we went fishing in 1982 and he lost the car keys in the lake.
They become storytellers. They aren't just signing a roll call anymore. They're contributing to a biography.
And they can upload photos. This is a massive feature. The funeral program site really emphasizes this capability. All of a sudden, the grieving family isn't just seeing a list of names. They're seeing their loved one through the eyes of others.
That's powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. They might see a photo of their dad at a conference in Vegas that they never knew existed. They might hear an audio clip of his laugh from a video someone took at a barbecue 10 years ago that they'd completely forgotten about.
Wow. You're crowdsourcing a life. You're building a collective memory.
You are. A paper guest book is a list of witnesses to a death. A digital guest book is a multidimensional tapestry of a life. It turns the record from a static noun, the book, into a dynamic verb, remembering. It creates a much richer, more textured picture of who the person actually was, not just who attended their funeral.
Which connects perfectly to the third pillar, longevity, or what I'm calling the bookshelf problem. Because let's be honest with ourselves and with the listeners. Where is the guest book from your grandmother's funeral right now?
It's in a box. Or it's high up on a shelf in a closet. Or maybe in the attic somewhere.
And when was the last time you actually opened it?
Probably never. Or maybe once, the week after. Because, and this is the hard truth, it's a painful object. It's a snapshot of one of the worst days of your life.
It smells like the funeral home.
Yes. It reminds you of the casket. It reminds you of the raw, immediate shock of the loss. It is a static artifact of trauma.
But the digital book acts differently. The research suggests it has a different emotional weight over time.
Fundamentally differently. Because it's living. The research highlights a concept in grief psychology called continuing bonds. Now, old school grief theory, think Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages, was often interpreted as being all about closure.
Right, you go through the stages, you reach acceptance, you move on, you get over it, you close the book.
Modern grief theory completely rejects that. The theory of continuing bonds says we don't move on from the deceased, we move forward with them. We maintain a relationship with them, just in a different form.
And the digital guest book is a tool for that.
It's the perfect tool for continuing bonds. You can revisit it on their anniversary, you can go and read the stories, you can post a new message on their birthday, and, importantly, you might get a notification 3 months later that someone else has just posted a new memory.
That second wave of support seems so crucial. Because the funeral ends, everyone goes home, the casseroles stop coming, and that's when the profound loneliness really hits.
That is the danger zone for grief, the 3 to 6 month mark. The world has gone back to normal, the phone stops ringing, but your world is still completely shattered. Getting a notification that says, hey, I'm thinking of your mom today, here's a song she loved, that is a lifeline.
It's a reminder.
It tells the grieving family, you haven't been abandoned in your grief, she hasn't been forgotten. A paper book sitting on a shelf cannot do that. It can't reach out to you.
It's proactive. The paper book is passive. The digital book can be proactive. It actively facilitates that continued connection.
Exactly. It facilitates an ongoing conversation about a life rather than just being a finalized statement about a death.
Okay, I'm completely sold on the why. The psychological benefits seem incredibly clear, but let's get practical. Because if you execute this poorly, it can feel tacky.
It can feel awful.
It can feel like you're trying to turn a funeral into a marketing event or a social media circus. We need to talk about Section 3, the friction points and the solutions. How do we actually do this without it being weird or disrespectful?
This is where the rubber meets the road. And the number one non-negotiable rule from all the experts is discretion. You do not want to force this on anyone. The fear of distraction is valid. If you have people holding up iPads to record the service or scrolling through comments during the prayer, you have lost the plot.
So, no announcements from the pulpit. Please like and subscribe to the guest book.
Absolutely not. That shatters the sacred atmosphere. The integration must be what the source calls quiet integration. It should be discovered, not announced. It should feel gentle and optional.
Okay, so give me an example of a bad setup versus a good setup.
A bad setup is having a brightly lit iPad on a stand right next to the casket, forcing people to engage with the screen while they are trying to have a private moment viewing the body.
That sounds horrible.
It's intrusive. It creates a massive conflict between the physical reality of death and the digital world. A good setup, on the other hand, is the tablet station in the foyer.
The foyer, the transition space. Why there?
Right. Imagine the layout of a typical funeral home. You have the paper book on the main podium, front and center. That's for tradition. That's the primary thing people see. Then, maybe 6 feet away, on a separate, smaller table, you have a tablet on a nice, tasteful stand. It's secure. It has a simple, elegant sign that says something like, share a memory or photo online.
It's an option. It's a
Okay.
choice. It's not in your face.
And it separates the traffic. The traditionalists go to the paper, the storytellers, or maybe the younger cousins who are more comfortable with tech, can go to the tablet. And you avoid that bottleneck at the entrance. But the best practice, the real gold standard, according to the research, isn't even the tablet in the room.
What is it then?
It's the QR code on the funeral program.
Now, QR codes have had a weird history. They were a bit of a joke for a while. Then the pandemic made them completely essential for everything from menus to medical forms. Are they acceptable at a funeral?
They are, if you use them correctly. The key here is what the source calls the take-home factor.
Explain that. What's the take-home factor?
Most people do not want to stand in a busy lobby and type a 500-word story on an iPad while people are waiting behind them. It's awkward. The keyboard is on the screen. Your aunt is bumping your elbow. It's just not conducive to deep, reflective thought.
Right, but everyone takes a program home with them.
Exactly. They take the funeral program home. They put it on their fridge or on their coffee table. It sits there for a few days as a reminder.
And later that night, or maybe the next day, they're sitting on the couch. They're feeling quiet and reflective.
Exactly. They've had a glass of wine or a cup of tea. They are finally, privately, processing the day. They see the small, discrete QR code on the back of the program. That is when they scan it. That is when they write the long story. That is when they find that old photo on their phone and upload it.
So the QR code effectively moves the interaction from the public, hurried space of the funeral home to the private, reflective space of the person's own home.
Precisely. It gives people the time and the emotional space to compose something truly meaningful. It respects the solemnity of the service by removing the screen from the sanctuary, but it keeps the connection alive.
But what about the grandma factor? You know, the non-tech savvy guest. If we go all in on digital, are we telling Aunt Martha that she doesn't matter because she doesn't have a smartphone?
That is a huge risk, and the source material warns against it explicitly. You cannot make digital mandatory. That is exclusionary. If you do that, you are committing the exact same sin as the paper book, just in reverse. You're locking out the older generation instead of the distant one.
So what's the solution?
The advice is to always have assistance, human assistance.
Tech support at a funeral. That sounds corporate and weird.
Think of it less as tech support and more as gentle hospitality. Maybe it's a grandchild or a staff member from the funeral home who is trained for this. They stand near the tablet station. They don't push, they don't sell, but they offer. Would you like to share a memory in the digital book? I'd be happy to type it for you.
That's a lovely touch. It turns a potential technology barrier into a moment of human connection. Tell me what you want to say and I'll make sure it gets there.
It's hospitality. And that's what a funeral service is at its core. It's about hosting a community in their grief. You want to remove friction, not add it.
Yeah.
The golden rule here, according to every source we read, is that participation must always, always be optional.
Okay, let's move to the nuts and bolts. Section 4, the mechanics of setup. If I'm a listener and I'm unfortunately in the position of planning a service for a loved one, how do I actually set this up? Do I just build Wix website? Do I make a Google form? What's the best practice?
You could do those things, but the experts strongly recommend using dedicated memorial platforms. There are a lot of security and privacy concerns here that you just don't think about until it's way too late.
Like what?
Trolls, spam, data harvesting.
The idea of a troll showing up on a memorial page for my mom just makes my stomach turn. But I guess the internet is the internet everywhere.
It is the dark side of open access. If you just put a public link on Facebook or in an online obituary, you are inviting the entire world in. And the world isn't always nice. Or, much more commonly, you get spam bots posting links to crypto scams in the comment section. It's absolutely horrific for a grieving family to have to deal with that.
So you need a platform with guardrails, with moderation tools.
What kind of tools should you look for?
Approval cues. This is non-negotiable. It means that nothing, absolutely nothing, should go live on the site until a human being, either a designated family member or a funeral home staffer, clicks approve.
It acts as a filter, a protective barrier. It's a safety valve. It gives the family complete control over the tone and content. You also want the ability to password protect the page if the family wants total privacy. Maybe you only send the link and password to invited guests. And you can set time limits. Maybe you leave comments open for a month and then you lock the page as a read-only archive forever.
That seems really smart. It keeps it a safe space for grief. It ensures the digital guest book remains a sanctuary, not a public message board.
Exactly. And another big mechanical consideration is ownership of the data. What happens if the website you use goes out of business in 5 years? Do you lose all your dad's memories?
That's a great question. Digital rot is a real thing. Websites disappear all the time.
They do. So you need to look for platforms that allow you to export the entire book. The funeral program site mentions this specifically, the ability to turn the digital entries back into a physical printed book later on.
Oh, I love that. You're closing the loop. You gather all the rich stories and photos digitally from all over the world, but then you can print them out into a beautiful hardbound book to put on the shelf.
It's the best of both worlds. You get the volume, inclusivity, and richness of digital, the stories, the photos, the audio clips, but you end up with the permanence and artifact quality of paper. You can hold it in your hands. It becomes a family heirloom.
Let's just circle back to the integration with printed materials for a second, because that seems to be the crucial bridge. The wording on the funeral program matters, right? You don't want to sound like a flight attendant giving instructions.
Tone is everything. The suggestion from the source is to use the funeral program as a gentle guide, an invitation. You don't say, go here to sign. That's an order. That's a command.
So what do you say?
You say something like, you may also share memories and condolences online at, or to view and contribute to a living memorial, please visit.
You may also, it's permissive, not directive. It's an offering.
Exactly. It frames it as an opportunity, not a chore. It aligns the digital element with the traditional guide of the service. It feels like a suggestion to extend the memory rather than a requirement to log in and do a task.
I want to zoom out a bit here as we head into our final section. We've covered the how and the what, but let's really look at the so what. Section 5, we touched on continuing bonds, but I feel like there's a bigger cultural shift happening here. It feels like we're moving from a culture of monument to a culture of memory.
That is a profound and accurate shift. For thousands of years, the primary way we remembered the dead was with stone, a headstone, a mausoleum. It's heavy, it's permanent, it withstands the weather, but it is silent.
All it has is a name and 2 dates. The dash in between is where the life was, but the stone can't tell you about it.
Right. And maybe a short quote if you're lucky. Beloved father. Or rest in peace. It's a broadcast from one point in time. It's authoritative. But these digital archives, they are crowdsourced biographies. They are living documents.
It changes who gets to write the history of a person. Usually, the obituary is written by one person, the spouse or the eldest child. They control the narrative. They tell the story they know from their perspective. But a digital guest book allows the coworker, the drinking buddy, the student, the neighbor to all add their piece of the puzzle.
It gives you a 360-degree view of the human being. And for the survivors, for the family, that is incredibly healing. You might realize, I knew my dad as a father, but I didn't know him as a mentor. Reading those stories from his former students fills in the blanks of his life. You learn things about the person you lost after they are gone.
It validates that his life had ripples, that he touched people in ways you never knew.
Ripples is the perfect word. The paper guest book captures the splash, the people standing right there on the day of the funeral. The digital guest book captures the ripples, how far that person's life reached, across time and across space. It captures their true impact.
And it acknowledges the hybrid world reality we all live in. We conduct our lives on our phones, we fall in love on apps, we work on Zoom, we maintain friendships on WhatsApp. Why should our death rituals pretend that technology doesn't exist?
That's the disconnect we started the whole conversation with. We try to keep tech out of death because we think it's respectful. But if our lives were lived digitally, our deaths need to acknowledge that. To deny the digital connection is to deny a huge part of how we loved and lived in the modern world.
There's a quote from one of the articles that stuck with me. If you are crying while reading a message on a screen, that emotion is real.
It is. We need to stop thinking of digital connections as less than or inauthentic. Emotional resonance is platform agnostic. A text message can break your heart just as much as a handwritten letter. A digital guestbook entry can heal you just as much as a hug can. The medium is not the message. The love is the message.
So, to wrap this all up for our listeners who might be planning a funeral one day or just attending one and wondering about these new tools, what are the big takeaways?
I think there are 3. First, inclusivity. Digital tools solve the geography problem. They let the people who are far away feel close. And that is a profound gift you give to your community. You are opening the door to everyone who cares, not just everyone who can afford a plane ticket.
Second,
Richer storytelling. We are moving from signatures to stories. We are capturing the voice, the photos, the specific memories, not just the names. We are building a collective biography, not just an attendance list.
and the method. How do we do it right?
The hybrid approach. Don't replace, extend. Keep the paper for the ritual, use the digital for the reach, and wrap it all in intention. Design the experience carefully so it feels like a safe, solemn extension of the service, not a jarring distraction from it.
It's really a roadmap for a modern goodbye, isn't it? It's taking the best of tradition, the reverence, the ritual, and pairing it with the best of what modern connectivity offers us.
It is. It's evolving the ritual to match the reality of our lives. It's about meeting people where they are.
I have one final thought that's been nagging at me through this whole discussion. We've talked about the past, the paper book, and the present, the hybrid approach.
Yeah.
But I want you to think about the future for a second.
Okay, go on.
Right now, we see the digital guest book as an add-on, a supplement, a nice to have. But as we move forward, as the generations who grew up entirely online, whose entire social lives are documented in the cloud, start to pass away, do you think the digital record becomes the primary record?
I think it's inevitable. Absolutely inevitable.
Are we moving to a world where the real monument isn't the stone in the ground, but the server in the cloud? Where the ultimate measure of life isn't who showed up at the chapel for 2 hours on a Tuesday, but the living archive of stories, photos, and videos left behind?
From a monument of stone to a monument of data, it's a fascinating, slightly terrifying, but I think ultimately beautiful shift. We are building libraries of lives accessible to anyone, anywhere, forever. We are ensuring that no story is ever truly lost to time.
Something to think about the next time you see that little QR code on the back of a funeral program. Don't just scan it.
Write the story.
Thanks for diving deep with us today on the Funeral Channel Network. We'll see you next time.